secretive sort of thing. You kept it inside the family, and I think more and more people realize you can't do that. So support might be not just getting the help you get in counseling, but getting involved in networks of people, or just being honest and what I think has happened and what I've watched. So my kids are now my adults. My son and daughter are 28 and 30, and just the change in people's willingness to say, my child has had a challenge, and if they know, I've always been fairly open. My daughter is married to a woman, so she had certain challenges coming through Lake Washington High School, and back when they refused to have a gay-straight alliance. And so her younger brother worked really hard at that, and they couldn't get a teacher to even sponsor the club or enough kids to be willing to join back in the early 2000s. So I think sort of looking at there's a greater willingness to say unless we start talking about it, you can't just sort of squish things underground. I think that it was not uncommon 10 years ago more than 10, but when my daughter was coming out and I would talk about it, other adults would say to me, other parents would say, well, are you going to have her fixed or counseled in a way that's... Yeah. So definitely that there's a huge shift in people saying, well, no, this is my child. There's nothing wrong with my child. How do we get help, even though the rest of society might have more problems with that? So I think that's also another thing. I think the idea that once you're broken, you're going to stay that way forever. Well, you don't have to. Things that are situational. So the trauma-based therapy is very good with that, saying, well, look what you've experienced. It's not surprising that perhaps you're depressed, or a survivor of sexual abuse, or horrible bullying, or something like that. It used to be sort of like, well, you don't want that diagnosis of mental illness because it's going to stick with you forever. Right. Whereas we all have periods in time, and adolescence is particularly challenging that way. And so that's another thing. And then also I think we do a lot of work in bullying. We don't like to call it anti-bullying. Like, we're trying to build compassion, but it just doesn't sell the same way. People will get upset, schools will get upset, the legislature gets upset and somehow thinks if we pass a law saying you can't bully, that's going to take care of it. Yeah. It's a little deeper than that. No, and so the piece that I like in the work that we're doing now with elementary school kids, which we're training the older students to actually go in and do workshops for younger students to build a more compassionate place, is that I don't know that anybody really wants to be a bully, and that there's as much harm to a bully as there is to those that are bullied. And in some ways, the long-term outcomes for each, there's risks. So it's in everybody's interest to try to change that dynamic as soon as we can. And sadly, we know that bullying is often a learned behavior. So by the time some kids show up at kindergarten, first grade, or even preschool, what they've seen demonstrated at home, and it's not because they're poor or a certain ethnicity or whatever. They're just dynamics for what they've witnessed is a bullying type of behavior. And school really is that place where from the get-go you can start talking about teachers reinforcing compassionate behavior, not turning a blind eye because you like that popular kid, and no, Johnny couldn't have done that. He's such a good boy. Right. So those are big. Just understanding that the bullying harms both. It's not one or the other. Ways.